Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series Westworld. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our Telegraph edition where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and provide our feedback on the top listener email and voicemail for the week. And boy, what a week it has been for voicemail and email. This week's episode is Season 4, Episode 3, Ane Fall. And Big D, I cannot believe the number of voicemails just keeps growing and growing, and they get more and more creative. I'm super excited for this batch.
I'm super excited because a lot of people are joining me in Crazy Town, and that's what I love. The crazier, the better. And I have a new sound that I'm going to use for some of my brethren. If you come up with some shit that even I think's crazy, I might give you the... Yeah, you're going to join me in fucking Crazy Town. We're going to fucking just get on the train, and we're going to go fucking just to the edges of reality.
I'm sitting here thinking he's going to use the cuckoo sound, but no, you took it next level. You just got rolled out to the mound by that little cart that takes from the bullpen.
Yeah.
You're fucking going to Crazy Town. Choo-choo,
Exactly.
motherfuckers.
Yes, but Gene, I also want to say it is wonderful to see your face again. People might not be able to pick this up, but on Tuesday, we had technical issues where for the first time in 6 years, we all record remotely, but we can see each other. Due to technical problems, we couldn't use the video, so we had to record blind. So we couldn't see when the other person was like, hey, I got something to say, like a normal conversation. So it is nice to be back because I melted down. I almost had a seizure. I thought I was having some kind of psychotic episode. So it's good to be back to normal.
So for those of you listening who haven't listened to Telegraph before, this is our voicemail and email for the week. Everybody who writes in, we pick the best of those. Anybody who calls in or uses our SpeakPipe feature at shatpod.com/TV. We take all those into consideration and we pick the best of the best. But the email that doesn't make it still appears on our website, shatpod.com/TV. Big D is kind enough to post it all there and we reply there to those emails. Also, email that you hear tonight might be truncated and shortened so that we have enough time for lots of them. And in that case, the entirety of the email is on shatpod.com. So be sure to go there, navigate to the TV shows, then Westworld, then the Telegraph, and read all of those in their entirety. This week, we got an assortment of voicemail and email that's covering Bernard and his travels through time, the show quality, theories on Christina, the flies, and an assortment of other topics. But let's get started with the voicemail from Tom in North Carolina with his ideas on how long Bernard has been in the Sublime.
I have two quick thoughts. This is Tom from North Carolina. Wanted to say that I think the time that Bernard has been in the Sublime is a lot longer than what they're kind of leaning on. One of the things that gives it away for me, not only the dust on his body, but also if you look outside the hotel room, there is a tree that has clearly grown up and through the building. And that takes time, probably close to 20 to 25 years. My guess is that the character that he meets at the diner is probably Frankie grown up, which makes sense because she looks about 20 years older than the young Frankie. Also, I think that the park that they are experiencing or trying to find in the desert is actually the 20s park or the Clapper Park, however you want to look at it, and that it basically was used for a short period of time and then shut down. I think they just wanted to use it to test the flies to see if they could get humans and how the flies would work on the humans. And I honestly think that Charloris's ultimate goal is to turn humans to subservient to the hosts, just like the hosts are subservient to the humans, coming around full circle. I got a strong feeling about that, but that's all for now. Thank you so much, and guys, keep up the good work.
So, Tom, I want to thank you. This was something I'd also noticed. I even went back to the finale of season 3 to see what the porch looked like when Bernard and Stubbs went into the hotel room. Gene's shaking his head, but I did it. Yes, there was no tree. It was well maintained. When we see it again now, there's a giant hole in the roof, and also there's a substantial tree. And anyone who has studied Chernobyl will know this is approximately 20 years of growth without man, somebody trimming it. So I think your timeline of 20 years is very close to accurate.
It's interesting you bring up the 20 years number. Now, I've heard a rumor, and I'm not going to give you the exact number because I don't want to spoil it for people, because this was not put out officially by HBO. In fact, it came out from HBO and then was deleted, right? But that number is out there. If you want to know what it is, go out there and search for how long Bernard has been there and the tree, and you can see it. But I'm not going to reveal it on the pod because that would be breaking our rules. Thanks, Tom, for your voicemail. Next up, we have an email from Coach Marcus, who we haven't heard from in a very long time. He says, "Dear hosts, so good to be back listening to the Shat crew on a regular basis as I ride the obsession train back into the park. In my opinion, this is the episode that really invokes what Westworld is all about." He's talking about episode 3. "I agree with Big D that there is definitely a Doctor Strange moment when Akecheta, back in the Sublime, tells him about the various possible outcomes. I do like the fact that he has to, quote, carve his path for a possible survival. Obviously, we are jumping back and forth in time, and I do agree that the woman they met at the diner will turn out to be Frankie grown up because they still haven't figured out when they are. I thought it was supposed to be 7 years later, but I guess Bernard has to figure out when he is based on his possible outcomes. I'm sure it's just to keep the story going, but wouldn't it be much easier if Stubbs and Bernard just stopped to compare notes for a second? Chef's kiss to the 1920s version of Metallica's Sandman. Clearly, Maeve needs an upgrade, but now that Caleb has been infected by the flies, it's time for Dolores to be brought back so she can save them both. Man in Black was obviously ready for both of them, or how else would the Frankie trap have been set? Finally, Big D is 100% correct. We have to go back and rewatch. Freeze frame to see what's showing on monitors and books in the background. The fact that we are willing to go back and rewatch everything means the show has found its legs and is preparing to sprint. I'm here for it. You guys are the best, Coach Marcus."
So I'm here for it. I love the freeze frame. I love the investigating. I love doing it as a community. So that's the exciting part about the show, and I agree with you. It's exciting to feel that again.
Well, thanks, Coach Marcus, for your email. Next up, we have one from Craig talking about multiple time frames. And Craig says, "Hey, guys, now that it seems we're clearly looking at least 2 timelines, things are becoming more plausible. I believe that Bernard and Dolores' timelines are the same. Maeve and Caleb exist in the 7 years post-war timeline. He's calling it P7. Originally, Dolores was correct that in order to save the world, she had to have Bernard be the keeper of the Sublime, and that was the real plan all along. In the P7 timeline, the park exists to test the technology Dolores will eventually use to take the entirety of humanity into captivity. The prototype tower and Fly Lab are experiments, which is why the Six Flags park exists in the first place." I love that they just take your shit as gospel. Fast forward to the future timeline, P plus ?
Yes.
And we have Frankie and her crew searching for the weapon to take down the tower and the mind control Dolores has deployed to control mankind. They are clearly aware that the hosts are all around, evidenced by knowing exactly what was in the bag. I think Christina is a part of what hosts do in the future. They create narratives to control the goo-infected human population. To be effective and keep them from waking up, the narratives must be extreme. This, I think, is a commentary on social media and the way it is slowly taking over programming us and losing track of what is really important. Unknowns. 1. How does Dolores gain access to the encrypted data at the dam? 2. What is the weapon in the desert? And 3, how is Christina human? I do not think this is really true. Just a few thoughts from Craig.
Okay, so Craig almost got me to be the first member of the train, but I agreed with his first 2 points, so I can't say he's crazy. He sounds very rational to me. The third one, Christina being in the future, I still don't know if I agree with that. I have some other theories that I'm kind of stewing on right now, but your unknowns. How does Dolores gain access to the encrypted data? 2 options. Either 1, we now know that Maeve is aware that Bernard has the key. That's 1. Or 2, possibly you could somehow resurrect or hack the data out of Dolores's carcass that was hooked up to Rehoboam. What's the weapon in the desert? If you watch the trailer for the next episode or the preview, I think you'll have your answer. And how is Christina human? I don't think she is human. The only way she could be human is if she was the inspiration physically and maybe spiritually for the host, Dolores. But I think we're going to get some answers, and I have a little crazy idea that I'll get to a little bit later.
Big D holding back was just for you, Ferdinand. If you're out there listening, it was just for you.
It was.
All right. Thanks, Craig, for your email. Next up, we have one from Gillian, who hit me up on Twitter talking about parallels between Westworld Season 4 and World War II. She says, I don't know if it's a theme or just like the inspiration behind the characters, but I've been watching Hale through the lens that she is Hitler. Point one, the war against the robots was 7 years ago, or if you're Craig, P7. From what we see in Season 4, humans snuffed out robots and destroyed them. Hale went underground and started building her army. This is a parallel to World War I ending, no one looking at Germany. Hitler begins compiling his army. Point two, Hale's army consists of Gestapos, William, Clem, Vice President, and 249 other replaced humans. They're all copies of Hale, meaning they would carry out her plans or she will speak through them. And now she's creating her Nazi soldiers with the fly-controlled humans, like the real low-level Nazi soldiers. They don't really know what they're doing or why they're doing it. They don't even agree with what they're doing, but they have to do it. Point three, host William opens the park in America to unsuspecting humans who have no idea what's about to come. Hitler opened the 1936 Olympics without anyone knowing what was to come. Point four, Hale plans to cleanse the human race and make them second class or lower to hosts. And point five, Hale is experimenting on people. And this isn't like, oh, my theory is the best, because it's not so much a theory as it's just interesting to think, who is Hale mimicking? What is Nolan saying about history repeating itself, rhyming with itself? Fuck, I can't stop. Also, point six, Oppenheimer tested the nuclear bomb in Nevada, or rather in the area of land that we find the new park in. Once we created the nuclear weapon, we no longer could live in a world without it. Can't put it back in the box. Hale's fly technology is uncontrollable. You can't just get rid of herds of flies. You won't be able to put that weapon back in the box. And she's testing it in all the same area we tested nuclear weapons in. I mean, come on. So I want to make one point here before you get going, Big D, because I see your eyes lighting up here, is that the first nuclear bomb test, the Trinity bomb site, was in New Mexico, in Alamogordo. So it wasn't in Nevada. But in Nevada, they did have extensive nuclear testing in the 50s and 60s. So it is an area still associated with nuclear tests, which led me to think the contaminated zone might have actually just been contaminated from fucking the 50s and 60s. Nothing might have happened there in Westworld time.
You mean from nuclear explosions?
Yes, nuclear explosions in the 50s and 60s.
But listen, I agree with you. You don't want to destroy all the humans. You don't want to wipe them out because you need somebody to do the work. The host, if you're giving them free will, you don't want them they're not going to enjoy their best lives if they're out there doing the shitty jobs that we had robots doing in season 3. Have the humans do it. Let them do the menial tasks. Let them generate power. Let them do things that helps the hosts live their best life. And I think that would be Hale's end goal.
And Gillian, I've got to say, I appreciate so much you showing the restraint to not say, I know it, I called it, this is just World War II retelling, when in fact, writers might take inspiration from or might be paralleling a thing without it being an actual retelling of Hitler's rise to power and eventual demise. Now, we don't normally pull from YouTube, but I saw an absolutely outstanding comment from Victor Vasconcelos on YouTube talking about the difference between Bernard and Rehoboam. And we talked about their parallels on the deep dive. And Victor says, let's pretend chess is real life. The way Rehoboam works is pretty much by feeding him data, and he'll try to predict a match by making calculations, variables, and everything that could possibly go wrong. Bernard, on the other hand, played 1 billion chess matches, and because he's a machine, he has instant access to every single move that needs to happen for the game to go the way he wants. The moral difference between what Rehoboam and Bernard are doing is that Bernard lived in a simulated world where things happen in a specific way without being affected by him that led to the outcome he wants. He's changing small stuff like what Stubbs will eat because he knows it's the small choices that end up leading to big events. Rehoboam always looked for the shortcuts. It always tried to rig the game. Yeah, Bernard killed those guys, but they were bad hosts. He knows the right way to get the outcome he wants, whereas Rehoboam was paving his own way through any means necessary. It's kind of like real life machine learning. I'm not a programmer myself, but my best friend is a hotshot programmer in the country I live, and I asked him about it. When you feed a machine data, you're making a controlled model. There's a limit to how it can process and predict data. That's Rehoboam. But if you put a machine through thousands or hundreds of thousands of repetitions, simulations, and tell it the rules and the goal, it will eventually reach that goal by itself through trial and error. And when it reaches its goal, it'll try to optimize the route to the best of its ability. That's Bernard.
Okay, so now I'm going to promote a podcast, Gene, that you got me on. It's called The End of the World with Josh Clark, and it covers 8 episodes of existential threats to humanity. One of them is AI. You're 100% correct. And all of the experts in the field say the last inventions that human will make is a robot that can create and can improve itself. At that point, it surpasses human capability at an exponential rate. So the idea that now in the Sublime, it's been running for the equivalent of thousands of years for what has passed. I think it was 1,000 to 1 for what we've seen in the show. It makes sense that the Sublime has a capability far beyond Rehoboam. So in running these simulations, it would get us to all the possible outcomes. And I really like the email. Thank you. But check out that podcast, The End of the World with Josh Clark. Gene, thank you for suggesting it.
You're very welcome. And thank you, Victor, for writing to us on YouTube. Moving on from Bernard, let's get to the show quality. We had several voicemails about the quality of this show this season, ranging from very pleased to not so much. And we'll start off with B-Dubs calling in again about episode 3.
Hey, Shat. This is B-Dubs here. Holy frickin' free holies. This was the Westworld that we have been waiting for. It had intrigue. It had mystery. It had action. Goodness gracious, it had Bernard. Oh, how I've missed Jeffrey Wright. This show needs Jeffrey Wright. It had the world literally burning down. It had precognition, flashbacks, flash forwards, had comedic stylings of Stubbs and Bernard. We were able to explore new worlds. It had the Man in Black. Multiple Men in Black? It had flies, goo, parasites, science, yo. Most importantly, it had what the first 2 episodes lacked, direction and momentum. As always, we appreciate y'all and look forward to your speculation. Oh, and let us know how we can support our Shat crew. A lot of us out here would be honored.
I got to tell you, I don't know what B-Dubs does for a career, but he should be a professional hype man. He's like the guy who'd come out in the ring and hype us up. And if he was before every episode of this podcast or the show, I think he could get like at least 30% more enjoyment by everyone.
My favorite part was the science, yo. B-Dubs, it kind of makes me sad, though, because as much as I love Aaron Paul and Breaking Bad, he seems to like ruin every scene he's in this show. He was oddly enough my least favorite part of the episode, in an episode that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, and if you want to support the podcast, there's a couple ways you can do it. On the website, there is on shatpod.com, there's a support tab. If you can do it, we don't ever want anyone to give anything that they can't afford or put themselves out. If you can't do financial to help us with all of the costs of the servers, the hosting, the processing, the equipment, everything, just recommend us to a friend. You would be surprised if everyone out there had 5 friends and they recommended us and only 4 hated us. We would just, we're almost going to hit 10 million downloads, Gene. So maybe D-Bubs could push us over the edge. And
for those of you out there, if you want to introduce your friend to Westworld, this is a great episode to do it with. Like, this is the episode you want to say, I wish they'd started the season with this, because it's immediately got you.
Yeah, but then it would have been downhill with the other ones, and at least we're going up the hill. It's exciting.
Yeah, then we'd be on the pod being like, oh, filler episode. Yeah. Thanks, B-Dubs, for your voicemail. Next up, we have a voicemail from London. It's Dane.
Hi, all. This is Dane from Wapping in London. I've been watching Westworld from the beginning. I think it's beautifully made, pretentious, and now it's gone completely off rail. It's absolute rubbish. How many stories do they want to run? How confusing is it? And you think it's good? It is rubbish.
You know what's not rubbish? That voicemail. That was fantastic.
I felt like he was describing me for a second. Beautifully made, pretentious, off the rails. Now, Dane, I totally hear what you're saying here. I think that episode 3 got us closer to where we need to be. Is it a shadow of what season 1 was? Yeah, absolutely. Season 1 to me was groundbreaking television. It's up there with season 1 of Deadwood. It's up there with season 1 of The Wire and Game of Thrones. Whereas right now, I would say that it is maybe the best thing on TV, but I don't know that it's the Westworld it once was. So I don't know if I call it rubbish, but I'm not calling it perfect.
Yeah, and I think anyone who watches the featurettes at the end of the episodes or in between, where you see the detail that they put into the set, the characters, the costumes, they're trying, and I'm not making excuses for the show. It is beautiful. It is well thought out. We just have to hope that it is a cohesive vision. And, you know, when they did season 1, it was easy to do because you had a start point and an end point. You didn't know if you were going to get season 2, 3, 4. So to come online and try to figure out an arc, it would be a bit of a mess, but I'm really hoping, I have faith. It might be blind faith, but I think they're going to come up with a cohesive story at the end that we could go back and look at something like The Leftovers and think it was worth it.
But that's the scary thing here is that they have a 5-season arc planned out. So season 4, they knew where season 4 was going to go before they even got to it.
Yeah, but I'm okay where we are now. I'm okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing a podcast for it, people.
Oh, bullshit. You'd still be doing it just to hang out with me.
No, we'd be doing movies. We'd be doing 2 movies a week.
By the way, we had 2 people write in on YouTube this week saying that they had gotten rid of HBO, but they got it back just for Westworld, just for us. And I thought that was really, really fantastic. They said they would have just, binged it once the season was over, but that they wanted to go week by week. And in order to do that, they needed the subscriptions. That was very touching, you guys. We really appreciate it. And speaking of the detail put into every episode, going back to episode 2, Cy Haywood, who did the music for us that ends each outro to the podcast, we've gotten lots of email and voicemail about that too, about how wonderful it is. And he just does a fantastic job. He called in to talk about the music in episode 2.
Hi, Shat crew. It's Simon here of Making All Your Music fame. I wanted to drop you guys a voicemail for the first ever time to say a little something about the music in the show. I don't know whether any of you noticed, but a lot of the new themes that we heard coming out this episode had reversed instruments in them, especially in the Christina themed sections. And I can't help but wonder whether that's another hint that all of this, in terms of the Christina storyline, is taking place in some kind of mirror world. Anyway, as always, love the podcast. Still get a kick out of hearing my music. See you guys. Bye.
I appreciate it. If anybody wants to listen to some of his music, we have a link to Cy, to his SoundCloud, I think, in every one of our posts since his music was featured at the outro. He does instrumental versions of a lot of your favorite Westworld themes. Very talented guy. And I love that he picked up on this little detail that none of us would.
Yeah, the only time I've ever picked up that something was in reverse is when we watched Robot Jocks, and I realized that it was on a Nine Inch Nails track. So my ear, not the best. Thanks, Cy, for your voicemail. Moving on to Christina as a topic, we've got an email from Blaze Amaze, who says, I think Peter and all of the other oddities are remnants of Dolores' memories coming through and melding with her storytelling objective. For instance, Peter's story sounds similar to William's when you think about it. He is becoming aware of what's happening to him in a similar fashion to how Dolores started to become conscious in season 1. If Dolores latches onto it, it's because it's the first thing that obviously points to something being objectively wrong with the world she is in. While ultimately I'm sure something of substance will come from Peter's story, I don't think anything of real consequence will happen in Christina's story until she interacts with Teddy. I think they will get the location of the forge or Sublime from her, but inadvertently it will restore her memories completely and bring her back to life. And that comes from Blaze Amaze.
So Blaze, I'd had something kicking around in my head, and it finally kind of came together in this thought, and it has to do with your email and then something Emmett from Orange said. There is an odd nature to Christina, and I've been feeling like, maybe they're trying to defrag Dolores, the Dolores that was hooked up to Rehoboam. And that what we're seeing is an attempted hack. And if anybody's watched Loki, in episode 3, there was an episode where Lady Loki was trying to trick Hunter C in this bar. And the vision was they were having a drink and they were complaining about having brain freeze. And what she was doing was Lady Loki was trying to, through this like simulation or through whatever she was doing, to get her to go back to a memory earlier and to remember a certain fact. She was trying to find out where the timekeepers were. I'm getting a vibe that this is Christina is Dolores being hooked up and coaxed into recovering some data or memory. And Emmett from Orange wrote, and he said this last week. He said, "Don't you get the feeling that Christina's roommate is like Caleb's phone friend from last season? She doesn't really have a job. She's there for sometimes something like to guide you to keep Christina on point or bound her narrative. Come home, I'll meet you there, for example. Still find it all odd. Definitely feels like she's stuck in a mental prison and we're all trying to help her break free." That was Emmett from Orange.
Shit. It just occurred to me that when Christina goes on that date, her friend just leaves, right? Maya just leaves. They get to the place together and she just walks off, right? And then later she calls her and she's like, "Oh, I ran into somebody from work." And Christina says, "Yeah, sure." We've never seen her interact with another person. Yep. She's only interacted with Christina. Holy shit. Well, thanks, Blaze and Maze. And
happy to have you on board, Gene.
I feel like I just went to the opera, went to the speakeasy, and suddenly, shit, I'm on board the crazy train. Next up, we have a voicemail from Stu discussing Arnold and Dolores.
Right, guys. I'm telling you right now, Arnold and Dolores had a love story back in the day. Ford ruined it, okay? He got between them. That's what got between Arnold and Ford, because Ford had betrayed Arnold and he'd done something to Dolores. What we're seeing from Christina right now is the original Dolores. That's what it's based on. This is the full circle of the show. Forget about what's the tower and all this shit. No, it's not about that. It is about the true story and the trying to recreate all this fidelity stuff. It's trying to recreate Dolores, his love. Now, if you can't see that, guys, I'm going to send this message in every goddamn week until you guys acknowledge what I'm saying, because it's true. It is true. Arnold loved Dolores. Maybe Ford did too. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I know that Dolores is based on someone who wanted a happy ending. She didn't want all this craziness, that money man craziness. She wanted a happy ending. So did Arnold, but Ford got in the way. And you know it's true deep down. So get your tin foils out, wrap it firmly around your foreheads, and agree with me.
So, Stu, Arnold is just a boy standing in front of a girl and asking her to love him. That's what it is, Stu.
Stu, I appreciate your tenacity and, goddamn it, your forcefulness. I really respect it. But I just want to examine this theory here. So Arnold was married. He had a child. He died in the park. Ford made Bernard, or actually, Ford had Dolores create Bernard. Bernard still thinks he's married and has a dead child and is having an affair with Teresa. Then Bernard later recreated Bernard, gets out in the real world, and he goes and visits his wife, and we have a very, very warm episode in the interaction between the two of them, very touching. And you're saying Arnold was probably in love with Dolores, and maybe so was Ford.
Well, I will say there are some of their episodes when they're down doing like their little fidelity tests in season 1 underneath, and they're talking to each other. There is a loving nature. He's giving her books. He's reading to her.
It's his child.
Oh, Gene, sometimes you do crazy things. Sometimes you're just afraid of being hurt, and you let your famous actress girlfriend go back to America, and then you have to have a high-speed chase to go get her and to stop her, Gene. It's about love.
I feel like Stu's entire voicemail might have been inspired by Notting Hill.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and if you guys want to, Shat the Movies, Notting Hill this week.
Smooth.
Go give it a listen.
All right, next up we have a voicemail from Ken L, who also sent it in email form, but the voicemail is so clean, we got to go with that.
Hey, Shat hosts, this is Ken L coming at you with a pretty big theory. It's a little tinfoily, so get ready for it. This is going to take a couple recordings, but here we go. Charloris is Christina. After episode 3, it's all but certain that Christina's world happens in a time frame after Caleb and Maeve fail to stop Hale and William from enslaving humanity. Christina's world is one where the hosts are living as the dominant species as Hale wanted. Humans are being controlled by the tower after this technology is perfected through repeated testing in the Golden Age Park. However, the hosts don't realize this. And that's because Hale knows that not all hosts want some kind of twisted revenge fantasy. If you think about what Hale really wanted, what was stolen from her at the end of season 3, it was a simple life with her family where she could be happy. So she designs a world where hosts get to live the good life. They get cool jobs at Olympiad Entertainment. They get posh apartments in nice neighborhoods. You get the idea. Meanwhile, humans are relegated to total subservience. They remain in loops. They get kept in line with the fly-born parasites in the tower. Olympiad and maybe other companies like it serve as fronts through which hosts are unwittingly programming these unfortunate loops for their human counterparts, all to keep the system working. If you think about it, every game needs NPCs. So the humans here are the NPCs. They're programmed to do the shitty jobs and live shitty lives. For all we know, Hale got access to Solomon since Rehoboam is now dead and learned that in an optimal society, there's an optimal number, that isn't 0, of crime or death or poverty for an optimal, quote, perfect world to keep operating. So she designs one and throws all of those unfortunate, terrible things at the humans. Now, here's why I think that Christina is Hale. After successfully having this host paradise play out for several iterations, Hale decides to finally reward herself and give herself what she's always wanted, a happy life. There's been a lot of talk about the MCU over these last couple podcasts, and like Thanos, resting and watching the sun rise on a grateful universe, Hale puts down her sword and entrusts her perfect system to the hosts, both in the form of drone hosts and William running the tower on the outside, and also through hosts doing in-world inputs like through Olympiad. She wipes her memory and she gives herself Dolores' body. Now, she picks Dolores' body because even though she identifies more as Hale in the moment, maybe seeing Hale in the mirror every day would trigger something. Maybe she identifies, that Hale body, that Hale look with her as a warrior, and Dolores is more her persona when she gets to be at peace. So she sets herself up for a life designed for pure happiness. She gives herself a great job at Olympiad. She gives herself a great roommate, encouraging her to make connections through friends and love, and probably designs Teddy to go and find her.
I love how certain he is. He's the opposite of Jillian. He's very confident.
Now, I like where Ken's going here. I mean, it's out there, right? But at the same time, it's supported by the things we've seen. There's no way to really poke a big hole in it. There is more to this voicemail, by the way, so you can read it in its entirety on shatpod.com/TV. Go to the Westworld Telegraph, and his whole thing is there. What's interesting is Ken, in other parts of his theory, talks about how Dolores solved the maze once. So essentially, she's destined to do it again. And this is a really interesting thought that basically, kind of like we saw in the Matrix, let's say, right? Neo has a decision to make. He can choose whether to stay in the Matrix or escape the Matrix and fight the robots. Now, me, I'm a stay in the Matrix kind of guy. I'm like, hey, everything's fine here. Why the fuck would you go there? Reality is reality. It doesn't really matter, right? But what's different is, what if that decision was taken away from you? At Dolores' core in this story, what if she's the one that was always meant to escape, to find sentience, to find the truth? And no matter how much she tries to wipe it, no matter how much she tries to create a world in which she can exist in falsehood, let's say, the core of her essence, the thing she was born to do, is to escape it. And she can never set up an illusion perfect enough for herself. Thanks, Ken, for your voicemail and your email. Next up, we're moving on to the flies with an email from Mike. And Mike in Scotland says, "Dear hosts, are the flies we see interacting with season 1 hosts the same flies interacting with humans? Remember the hosts that seemed to break down from Ford's host update? They were first shown to have a failure after an interaction with a fly. At this point, we are shown that the board were getting ready to overthrow Dr. Ford. So were the flies the board's first attempt to sabotage Westworld? The difference between the biology of hosts and guests was likely only the technology needed for the host spheres at the time of the host uprising. Also, security would have known the update was due, and a certain member would have told Dr. Ford the board was up to something. It's possible Dr. Ford pushed another update to Dolores and the other hosts once he realized they needed to kill the flies and trigger his final storyline. Best regards, Mike from Livingston, Scotland.
But the hosts in season 1, when they encounter the flies, I thought it was just to show there's no reaction. They're climbing on the eye. They're not actually trying to burrow into people's ears, up their nose. I think it's just poetic justice that they're going to turn this symbol from the very first episode of Dolores killing that fly when she showed she couldn't kill any living thing to turn that now on the humans. I think that's what it is.
Thanks, Mike, for your email. Next up, we have one from Alex talking about how to survive the flies. And Alex says, hey, guys, first-time emailer, long-time listener. I've really been enjoying the podcast this season. The flies are giving me the heebie-jeebies. Apart from swatting them all away, I was thinking about how humans could escape or avert getting controlled by the virus that spread by them. And Alex lays out 3 options. Option 1, you've been given the virus by the flies already. Oh no, but to avoid being controlled, you wear a helmet, similar to the helmet that Daniel Wu's character wears when he greets C, Stubbs, and Bernard in episode 3. Perhaps this helmet blocks out noise, Magneto style. Option 2, I wanted to go back to the now defunct Insight Inc. In season 3, we were introduced to Drip, which both Caleb and the Man in Black were given. These fully dissolvable limbic tabs transmit a digital code to the brain, which is immediately translated into electrical impulses. Could we see a version of this being created by the humans to override the fly virus given to them by Dolores? Option 3, in a desperate last-ditch attempt to save humanity, we get the real-life actor Jeff Goldblum, who miraculously at age 107 is still alive in the Westworld universe to achieve fidelity. His uploaded mind is then placed into a fly. Now the fly, Jeff convinces all of his tiny fly friends to leave the humans in peace. Problem solved. In season 1, Dolores tells Teddy of the story of the blue tongue virus, which was affecting her herd of cattle. She ultimately ended up killing all the cows, and it stopped the spread of the virus, but at the cost of all her cattle. This metaphor seems to be playing out in real time this season. Not all the humans are bad, but we all have to go if Dolores wants a world free of persecution of her kind. Seriously, though, I'm wanting to see how this pans out so I can sleep at night. Cheers, Alex.
Yeah, so they've mentioned tabs previously, and we got it also in the dating episode with Christina, where Christina's date is like, well, they got tabs to fix that. Why don't you fix that? It's logical that we've taken the next step into controlling people's emotions with these tabs and drips, and that could easily translate into some other kind of control. But I want to tie this into another email that we got from David Wright in San Diego. He also talks about the blue tongue virus, and he said, I had an ominous thought about where the fly scenario may be heading. If you remember in season 1, Dolores tries to explain to Teddy how her father solved the problem on their ranch that involved the blue fly infestation of the cattle. Teddy mistakenly thought that the solution was to cull the sick cattle from the herd and isolate the healthy ones. Dolores explains that the real solution was to kill all the cattle and burn them so that the smoke would kill all the flies. Could this be the solution that Bernard is going to propose with a secret weapon? The way to kill the parasite is to kill all the hosts. That is not looking good for Caleb or the rest of the infected humans. Totally agreed. There's a thought here. Akecheta says, under almost no of the possible variations of the timeline, does Bernard survive? Bernard could conclude at the end that the only way to solve the problem here, to protect humanity, is to kill all the hosts, not just the troubled ones. So that would be a nice tie-in here to what we were talking about with the infection. But thank you both to David and to Alex. Great emails.
Moving on from the flies, we're going to get into a question on a lot of people's minds, why Dolores needs the guest data. And this is a voicemail from Derek.
Hello, Shout On people. It's D-Rec. It's been a while, but I do still listen to you guys. Well, a couple things. Number one, I think you guys are missing a key point on why they're using the Roaring Twenties as the piece to their new park. And I think it's more thematic than anything. It's what was the Roaring Twenties? It was the Temperance, the peace time in between two huge wars. Now we saw one war, obviously, well, we didn't see it, but it was in the background, one war, and that is going to lead to another war. So thus, That's why they're using that time period. Another thing, I believe it was Big D that said that he didn't know why Charloris and host or whoever wanted the guest information, why they still needed the guest information. Well, my thing is, I believe that's beginning of whatever timeline they're using and the end of the timeline, maybe 50, 100 years later, but it's the beginning of the timeline when they're starting to replace all of the prominent people. And the reason why they need the guest information, the stuff that has collected, was because they need them to be able to pass fidelity tests. So thus they would need the person's personalities.
So, D-Rec, I think we have to remember there's more than just the human hat data that was in the Forge or that went into the Sublime. It is the actual afterlife. It's the Valley Beyond that has all of the hosts that escaped the park. It has all of their sentient beings, Akecheta, all of them that we're seeing. Bernard is now advanced thousands of years into the future. If Dolores can access that, you have the exact ability that Bernard does now. Bernard has the ability to alter the future to what he wants. If Charloris could get into the Sublime, she could get Akecheta or to run through all the scenarios where the hosts are surely to win. So I think that's more important. But that, again, that's just my 2 cents.
Something that just occurred to me is the man in black in the opening of this season, we all assumed was a host. And that might be a misdirect. We have no reason to believe he's a host. We never see him around the flies, so we don't know that they wouldn't attack him. He doesn't exhibit any super strength or anything like that. He's just a guy who flies in and makes a deal, right? What if he's a human man in black coming back for the data, for the guest data, the immortality theory that people started out with at the beginning of the season? It's entirely possible.
So, Ferdinand, at this point, I'm going to just say earmuffs. Earmuffs for about like 35 seconds. Okay, last warning, Ferdinand. I'm going to talk about something that we saw in one of the featurettes. So I don't know, Gene, if you saw it, that they were talking with one of the makeup artists, and they said there's a different makeup for host Man in Black and human Man in Black. The host Man in Black is more polished, less wrinkles. He looks like he's doing better. The human one is more ragged. So we have to keep an eye on them because inevitably they're going to switch places, that somehow he's going to trick his way out and, oh, no, I'm the real Men in Black. No, I am. And you're going to get the Spider-Man where the 3 of them are pointing at each other. We're bound to get that.
Big D's going to be sitting there going, don't they have dogs or scanners or something? Anyway, thanks, D-Rec, for your voicemail. Sorry I mispronounced your name. And speaking of trailers, we have an email from Michael from Denmark. So, Ferdinand, again, just skip ahead on this part. You're not going to like what we're about to say. Or anybody, really, who wants to avoid a trailer. Skip ahead. Michael says, hi, Shat crew. Christina's world must be another park. The evidence. If you watch the teaser and trailer for season 4, you will notice a hologram overview of the city, just like in the original Westworld Control Center. And in the trailer, you see Caleb move among people in the street that are frozen in time. Am I right or am I right? Sincerely, Michael from Denmark. And he included 2 photos to go along with it.
So, Michael, I think in the season 1, the park, that was to track the coming of goings of the guests and anything that broke down. Here, if it's the future and you're controlling your NPC humans and you're controlling them, you would need a map similar. How else are you going to control them and get all their narratives to match and to let your host out there? You have to track everything. Maybe it's just a new use for the same technology.
Yeah, perhaps Michael's point is that if you have an entire city that's under control and it is operating according to a plan, is that in itself a park?
No, I don't think anybody's...
I guess nobody's having fun, though.
Yeah, nobody's like, hey, I'm going to go to New York City. The whole point there is that the hosts don't realize maybe they're hosts, and the people under the control of the flies don't realize they're... Look, Gene, we're right back to no free will. It's all a loop. We're back to no free will.
I spent like 12 hours inside of New York, in Vegas, and I thought it was an excellent park. I went to Greenberg's Deli. I went and got a slice of pizza. People watched. What an underrated casino. At New York. This podcast brought to you by New York.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael, for your email. And we have a special voicemail to close out this episode. I asked Discount Don to turn his emails into voicemails, and he did not disappoint this week with this brilliant entry.
Are you tired of jobs whose paycheck push you into a higher tax bracket? Do you find yourself thinking, I'm spending way too much time with family or friends? Well, then I've got an exciting opportunity for you. Come on down to Discount Don's Career Institute and study the exciting field of television podcasting. We'll teach you how to podcast about niche shows and interact with their tens of fans. Who's up for an American Gods reboot? I know I am. Or maybe you want to tackle more popular shows like Game of Thrones or Westworld, where the writing and acting are so good that it's truly a labor of love. But Don, you ask, what if tonal shifts and poor writing in subsequent seasons ensure that I'll spend the next several years of my life defending a show in decline?
Yes.
That's not going to happen, because you see, each television show has a professional showrunner that will ensure the quality of each season is just as good as the last, if not better. So you guys don't have to worry. Did I say it, guys? Here at Don's, we're an equal opportunity all the way. Ladies, enroll in this exciting field, and let me tell you, there's no more welcoming and affirming space for women than the internet. So if podcasting is in your future, enroll today at Discount Don's Career Institute. And remember, we only accept cash. If your career needs to go from off to on, come on down to Discount Don's. Offer not available in states with punitive fraud laws.
Discount Don, you hit it on all the points, man. I think I feel like you really understand this. I would not be surprised Discount Don was a TV podcaster himself, because there were some inside jokes there that just really spoke to my pain, and I love you for it, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was both rewarding and painful at the same time. So thank you very much, Don.
Well, thank you to everybody who sent in a voicemail or an email. We really, really appreciate you listening in and participating. It's just amazing, the ideas that you guys come up with, the way you articulate yourselves, and it makes it a pleasure to do. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Westworld Telegraph. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatpod.com/TV. And again, you can go there, check out the emails that are on there already, thanks to Big D, and also leave us a message using SpeakPipe. Alternatively, you can email us, host@shatontv.com. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us Sunday for the Westworld Instacast.